Welcome, 102 students. Today we are going to do our discussion number 3. I'm going to start with a rose for Ecclesiastes, and then later we'll have a discussion of that Leviathan whom thou hast made. All right, so some matters of business today. First of all, if you have any questions, use that questions discussion board. We'll get those answered for you. Okay. Supplemental essay number 1 is due this week, so make sure you are working on that, and that will be due Friday by 11:59 p.m. Again, make sure you've watched the lecture on writing the supplemental essays. Make sure you include documentation in those essays, so I won't accept any essays that don't cite sources in the form of a in-text citation and a works cited page. So to get credit for those, make sure you document those sources appropriately in MLA format. Okay, so we're also going to be conducting a peer review this kind of weekend. So make sure you get your supplemental essay turned in on time. That way it can be put in the batch of essays to be peer reviewed. Okay, I will upload the peer review on Saturday, and they'll be due by Sunday. And so take a look at the peer review video to learn how to do that. Okay, let's go ahead and begin discussing a rose for Ecclesiastes. Okay, and I have some questions here that will help facilitate our discussion today. Why is Gallinger on Mars? Okay, what role do poets play in society? Okay, what does the unknown play in the story? What about literature as a whole? Okay, is Gallinger respected? But why or why not, and by whom? Okay, what does this story say about duty? Okay, we're going to analyze Gallinger's argument about vanity and pride. Okay, what does this story say about traditions? Okay, was the outcome of the story a miracle? What are miracles? Okay, is the story optimistic or pessimistic, and why? All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin talking about these questions. And the first one here, why is Gallinger on Mars? Okay, and if we think about the resources it takes to send another person to another planet, this story takes place on Mars. Why was Gallinger selected for this mission? Okay, and a lot of times when I ask this question, students give me a response that he's a linguist. He understands languages, and we have to kind of take a step back and ask ourselves: is he really a linguist? Because they have a linguist on Mars, right? I believe her name is Betty, right? And she is not able to do what Gallinger does. So what is it about Gallinger that makes him different? Okay, and if we think about that, we'll come to the conclusion that he is a poet, and that kind of leads us to the next question. He's on Mars because he is a poet. Okay, and what role do poets play in society? And in previous readings, and you might have noticed this from our Canvas discussion, our previous readings have had things to say about poets. Okay, and in terms of Starship Troopers, they talk about the Declaration of Independence being wonderful poetry, as kind of, in a sense of the kind of sarcasm of that poetry's not really worth anything, right? And that it's just nice sounding words. We've got another example of Hotspur, saying that he would rather be a howling cat than be someone who is known for the poetry, right? And so poets are often kind of looked down on and say they don't do anything useful. Okay, but here I think Roger Zelazny, and rightfully so, is pointing out the utility of poets. And he's saying that Gallinger can do something that a linguist cannot. And I think it's very specific that he puts a linguist and a poet right next to each other and gives them kind of the same task. And so I guess the question becomes, what is the difference between Betty and Gallinger? Okay, first of all, Betty's not able to crack the Martian high tongue, right? She is still wading through the grammar and everything of the regular tongue, right? But Gallinger's able to approach this from a different angle and is able to access that high tongue. Now, why is that? Okay, I think it's because Gallinger views language much different than Betty does. For Betty, language is her work, right? It is her profession. Okay, and you could argue that for Gallinger, it's the same, right? But I think Gallinger views language not as his work, right? As more of his kind of plaything, right? This is what he does and what he is passionate about. Not that you can't be passionate about your work, but this is what he wants to do. He wants to be with words at the expense of maybe friendship, at the expense of love, right? And so Gallinger is very much different from Betty, right? And so what do poets do for society? And I think Roger Zelazny does a good job of showing us what a poet can do, right? By putting him in this environment where uh, they don't really have poets, the Martians. They've got Lokar, who lived a long time ago, but other than that, there's not anybody writing, right? Everything has already been written, according to them. Okay, but what Gallinger does is he comes and he shows the Martians something new, right? He writes a poem about Braxa, right? And in that uh, in that poem, uh, he writes that Braxa is like a rose, right? And there's not a translation in Martian for a flower, so he has to use the uh, English word uh, for uh, for rose, and they're like, "What? Well, what is this?" And he shows them something new, something they could not see uh, for themselves, right? And he uses words to do so, and he eventually brings them an actual rose, right? And so Roger Zelazny here is saying that poets do this. They show us things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to see, okay? And that this is an invaluable service, right? And that poets should be revered, even though we can't take their words and really make good use of them, right? It's not really, you can't make a living, most of us can't make a living at being a poet. We have to do something else. And so I think Roger Zelazny is kind of, on one end, lamenting that idea that poets can't be self-sustaining, and showing us that this has worth. Okay, and uh, Gallinger was able to do something that a linguist couldn't do. Okay. Now let's kind of switch gears and go to the next question. What does the role of the unknown play in the story? Okay, so we can look at this question on several different levels. And on the first level, we can look at kind of what you read in your pre-reading, right, of this story. So when Roger Zelazny was writing the story, space exploration was kind of becoming a thing, right? We were going out, we were going to put people on the moon, and pretty soon there wouldn't be this unknown for the story to take place, because we would send rovers to Mars and see that there's no civilization there, right? And he was kind of lamenting that he was about to miss this whole genre of writing that he enjoyed a lot. It was going to be proved to be false. It was no longer able to sustain itself in the comfortable confines of the unknown. Okay, so that's one level here. Now, in terms of what sort of things does Gallinger not know? Okay, there's a lot, right? He doesn't know all of the prophecies of Lokar, right? He doesn't know that Braxa can get pregnant. He doesn't know that maybe Maguire is manipulating him, right? And so, really, for a story to take place, if the characters know everything that's going to happen to them, a lot of times they would act very differently, right? Gallinger would be a lot more guarded uh, going into the temple if he knew that there was a prophecy that a poet would come to them and would save their race, right? And so, in order for a story to happen and to have the characters go through what they go through, there has to be a certain level of unknown. And I think Roger Zelazny is doing a good job of kind of playing with this idea of we're going to have a lot of things that the character doesn't know, and then reveal them in quick succession to the point where Gallinger is going to be too much for him. We're going to take the unknown and just kind of slap Gallinger in the face with it. So we can see that the unknown plays an important part in literature. And so if you go into reading a story and you look for the unknowns, okay, and sometimes there's something called dramatic irony, where the reader knows something, but the character doesn't, and so these can be some interesting things to explore about literature. What do people know? When do they get to know them? And when does the reader also get to know them? So things to think about. Okay, so the next question is Gallinger respected? And if so, by whom, right? And one thing to look at, the first thing that we're shown is Gallinger respected by his shipmates, right? Those who he's on the mission with. And I think most of us would agree that no, he's not respected, right? He's that damn conceited rhymer. Okay, they don't know why they have to drag him along, and they don't like that he's hard to get along with. Okay, so Gallinger doesn't really respect them, and they don't really respect him. Okay, do the Martians respect Gallinger? I think early on in the story, we think, yes, they revere him as a holy person, right? But at the same time, what are they doing, right? They are not telling him uh, the prophecy. They're not. They're sneaking Braxa into his chambers, okay, and they're not uh, being honest with him, even up to the point where they vote to say no to Lokar. They don't tell Gallinger that. They just send him away, right? And they don't give him the type of respect that I think he thinks he's getting in the beginning. Okay, so I don't think they respect him. Uh, and I think the only kind of instance we have between mutual respect for people is Gallinger with the botanist, right? The fungus nut. Okay, and for some reason, these two people respect each other, right? And why is that? Okay, if we think about it, Gallinger is a very specialized tool, right? He is a poet, okay, and he's being used very delicately in this situation. And then we think about this other guy who specializes specifically in fungus, right? That's what his passion is. And he's there on Mars trying to grow fungus. And he's just having a great time. He's in his own world. Gallinger's in his own world. And they kind of respect that. And it's kind of an interesting dichotomy in that Gallinger recognizes that people probably don't value fungus. And this guy values fungus. People don't value me as a poet. Uh, well, they might value me as a poet, but they don't value me as a poet person, right? That kind of combination between the two. I think we can revere poets, but we don't have kind of a connection to them as a person. And that's really what Gallinger respects, is that here's a person who is into something at the same level that I'm into something. And we can kind of understand each other, and we don't get in each other's way because we're so busy with the things that we like. And there's some mutual respect there. So that's kind of an interesting relationship that they both kind of recognize that, hey, people don't appreciate this fine tool that does just one little thing. Uh, but being that thing, we do it well, right? It's kind of like, you know, we might respect a hammer more for its wide applications of things rather than, you know, a very small drill that can, you know, really get in there and do very specific things. So uh, uh, this kind of idea of respect based on specificity, right? And so that is very interesting. Okay, so the next thing we want to kind of discuss is, what does this story say about duty? Because a lot of our readings up to this point have at least covered duty a little bit. And I think this story does as well. But I think it takes a little bit of a different approach to duty. So let's think about some of the things that previous readings have said about duty. Okay, we've got Heinlein saying that you know, society should be based on duty. Okay, and we've got Beowulf who has multiple different motives about how he is going to attack the dragon. And he kind of puts it up as a front that I'm doing this for duty, but there's all these other things that are kind of in the background. Okay, so I think that's an interesting perspective on duty. We've got Henry IV, who his perspective on duty is duty should be honorable. right? And his big fear is that England's going to become a wilderness rather than a garden, right? And that kind of perspective on duty, that we should do whatever what is ever best to prevent chaos, right? And then I think this story kind of has a different perspective on duty. Okay, so and specifically with Braxa, right? Braxa had a duty, and her duty was to try to get pregnant, okay? And do so in a means where Gallinger isn't in the loop, right? In fact, he's specifically told, oh no, this can't happen, right? And so it's very deceptive in terms of this duty that she's trying to perform. And we'll get to some textual evidence here, but I think what here in a minute. But I think what Zelazny is trying to say here is that duty is no respecter of people's feelings, right? And Braxa, you can't fault her for, or duty would say you can't fault her for doing what she did, because it was her duty. It's what she was supposed to do. But it's a really horrible thing that she did, right? And using Gallinger in this way, okay, and forcing him to take the society on his shoulders and say, no, look, you have to change, right? And then to be unceremoniously kicked off the planet and probably will never see his child again, right? Duty doesn't take into account people's feelings, and maybe where sometimes it should, right? And it was a morally wrong thing to use Gallinger in this way, but duty said, yes, go and do this. Okay, so that's a perspective that I don't think we have seen thus far in our readings, is that, duty does not respect you. Okay, it doesn't take into account your feelings. Okay, so now let's take a look at Gallinger's argument about pride, okay, and vanity. Okay, so this was one of the discussion questions. So if you would like to pull that up while we talk about it, that could be helpful. So what sort of claim is Gallinger making? Let me go ahead and switch over to my document, or my tripod cam here. Okay, Gallinger is making the argument that okay, pride and vanity made humanity great. Okay, he talks about that thousands of years ago, the writer of Ecclesiastes, said that humanity should just give up, okay, because they're never going to be great. Okay, it's always going to be a bad place. Okay, but he's saying that in spite of this, we don't have hunger. So, oh boy, writing at the whiteboard. Okay, no hunger. Okay, no famine, right? Or yeah, that's hunger as well. So no hunger. It's been a long time since we've had war. Okay, maybe we've beaten them. Okay, we fed the hungry. Okay, no plagues. Okay, no famines. Okay, so we've beaten the things that have brought humanity down. Okay, so what is the warrant here? What basic assumption do we need to make in order to accept this argumentation? Okay, and basically what it is that pride and vanity did these things. Okay, they also traveled among the stars. Okay, sorry the whiteboard's such a mess, but all right. So, do we accept this argumentation? Okay, did pride and vanity get rid of hunger? Okay, did it get rid of war? Did it allow us to travel among the stars? Okay, I think this is maybe flawed argumentation because I think yes, pride and vanity uh, can make us try to do great things. Okay, uh, but I think a lot of these things would have had to have other motives behind them, right? Feeding the hungry, right? For example, that is an act of compassion. Okay, stopping wars, right? That is also something that is driven or has to be driven by compassion, right? Because you would think that pride and vanity would fuel wars, right? Okay, traveling among the stars, that is a great thing, and I think if you think back to the mindset of sending men to the moon, it was a lot pride and vanity, and a lot of it was national pride and vanity as we were in a space race. But at the same time, we see what some of the fruits were of sending people to the moon. And that has improved our world a lot and has allowed us to be more compassionate and have a better world, right, with a greater access to things like technology for everyone. So you can see that yes, pride and vanity have played a role in way the human race is trending, but I don't think it is the problem solver. Okay, and I think that's what Gallinger is trying to sell, right? Is that pride and vanity is this problem solver. Okay, and I think it's just not true. I think it gets you kind of trending towards greatness, but it takes other things that allow you to continue to be great. Things like love and compassion. And pride and vanity can only get you so far. And I think when he says, I didn't even believe it myself, I think he knew he was using flawed argumentation, that he thought that what was needed for the Martians, right? And so we can see that I think he's got some flawed argumentation here. Okay. All right. So what does this story say about tradition? Okay. And I think these two readings kind of go kind of hand in hand in terms of traditions and the way cultures are over time. Okay. We can see that in this society, the Martians overvalued their traditions, right? They were willing to follow follow their traditions to the grave, right? Lokar says that we will end, and so that's what we will do. We won't look into our problems deeper and try to solve them. Now, Lokar luckily built in kind of this back door saying, but if this happens, then, throw my words out the window, right? And so, in a way, they are still following traditions when they accept that their society needs to change. Okay, so I think Zelazny is saying that we have traditions, we can follow those traditions, right? But we shouldn't follow them too far, right? We should be flexible enough that when we realize that a tradition no longer is no longer healthy to have in our lives, we need to look for ways to change traditions. Okay, was the outcome of this story a miracle? Okay, and what are miracles? Okay, and I think there can be lots of different opinions here, and there's lots of different definitions of miracles. Okay, if we kind of break down some of them, we've got divine intervention, right? A God coming in and changing something. I don't think we have that in this story, right? But I think a lot of people think of that as miracles. Okay, we can also think about things that have a very low probability of happening. We think them as miracles. Okay, and I think do we have that kind of situation here? Okay, and one thing to consider is, Lokar, he said something will happen thousands of years before it happened. Usually, the further back you say something is going to happen, the less odds it is to happen, right? If you think about placing a wager, gambling here, if you say, a few years ago that something will happen, then there's fewer odds that will happen and a greater payout, right? So if you think about it in terms of that, yeah, Lokar thousands of years ago said something would happen. It happened, therefore it's a miracle. Okay, but you can also look at, okay, so how did this happen? Lokar said something thousands of years ago, and the Martians had that time to work towards making sure that it happens, right? So when you think of something that, okay, you have something to do and you've got thousands of years to do it, is that a miracle, or is that you having a lot of time to work towards something? Okay, interesting there. Okay, another definition of miracle might be just kind of the awe in which you find yourself in, right? We talk about something like the miracle of birth, right? That's something that is very biological. Everyone who has lived as a human being was born at one time, right? But when it happens and you're part of the process, right? You're witnessing it, and it becomes miraculous, right? And I think this is probably the closest definition that we can maybe accept. Gallinger was a completely different person before he came to Mars, right? And as he's leaving Mars and he sees Mars as kind of that swollen baby belly, right? As he's leaving, he's a completely different person, right? He's someone who has loved and lost in a very short amount of time, okay? And if someone knew Gallinger before and saw the end Gallinger after his thing, they would say that's a miraculous transformation, right? And so I think Roger Zelazny is really playing with the idea of miracle and kind of setting up different definitions and saying you can say either yes or no to this, you could say yes or no to that, or you could say yes or no to this. And he's very much walking the line of saying, what is a miracle, right? We've got all these definitions, and I've presented a scenario that when you look at all of these different definitions, you could say yes or no. And it's all about how you view this idea of miracle. Okay? And it's kind of the same thing here with this final question. Is this an optimistic or a pessimistic story? Okay? And I think you have to say optimistic or pessimistic for who? For whom, right? So is it optimistic for Gallinger? No way. He saved a race, but he lost. He was the big loser in this story, and to the point where he can't even kill himself successfully, right? And he can't do anything right. So for him, no. For the Martians, things are trending up for them, right? They've found a way to get out of their traditional rut, right? And they're able to look forward and help their race, okay? But at what expense, right? And so I think Roger Zelazny is also playing here, okay? And just like Ecclesiastes is kind of, there's a debate there between, is this optimistic writing or is this pessimistic writing? And it depends on your own perception of optimism and pessimism. And I think Roger Zelazny is presenting us a story. It's not optimistic, it's not pessimistic. It's just a story, and he allows your own perceptions to weigh in on this carefully written story. All right, so we've got just a couple of things to take a look at for a roast for Ecclesiastes. What role does poets play in society? Okay, remember he's referred to as the damned conceited rhymer. Okay, his response is interesting. So he says, "Let not ambition mock their useful toil." And now, when you probably read that or listened to it, you probably thought, "Oh, he's just spouting poetry," which was kind of the intent. Okay, he was saying, "I'm going to recite some poetry, and you're not going to know what it means, and that will prove my point to you." And so, if we have the whole poem here. This is The Cotter Saturday Night by Robert Burns. It says, "Let not ambition mock their useful toil, their homely joys and destiny obscure, nor grandeur hear the disdainful smile, the short and simple annals of the poor." And so Gallinger, in reciting one line of this poem, is saying, look, I know a poem that says that rich people don't know what it's like to be poor. They don't understand it. You can't understand it. And it's the same way with poets. If you're not a poet yourself, you don't know what it is to be a poet. Okay? And you should respect that just the same way the rich should respect the poor, right? And at least Robert Burns says the rich should respect the poor because they know something that a rich person could never know, right? They can't have the homely joys that uh, a poor person can have because the rich person doesn't know how to enjoy what they have because they have too much of it, right? And so he's saying being a poet's the same way. You can't know why I'm a poet and enjoy being a poet because you can't go there. Okay, so that's what that means. Okay, the poor see the world much differently than the rich do. Okay, And then, how does Gallinger see the world differently? Okay. Uh, what is Gallinger's first name? Okay. Talking about the unknown a little bit more here. Okay. What is his first name? Uh, if you can't think of what it is, it's because it's not given in the story. He's always referred to as his last name. This is very interesting to me because usually when we have a story, uh, a writer will try to incorporate as many details in it as they can, right? And there's this idea that if a story is very detailed, then it's true to life. But that's not exactly the case, right? We don't ever know everything about a person, right? Even someone close to us, a spouse or a family member, we don't always know uh, everything about them. And Zelazny purposefully didn't put his Gallinger's first name in here, okay? And it's kind of reminiscent of other poets too. So a lot of poets are known for only their last names, okay? And specifically in the novella, he mentions Yeats, Pounds, Crane, Stevens, and Gallinger, right? And so, do you know any of these poets' first names? Okay, William Butler Yeats, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot. Even when we know uh, his first name is abbreviated too. I'm pretty sure his first name is Thomas. But T.S. Eliot, Hart Crane, and Wallace Stevens. Okay, and we actually know that through uh, through interviews with Roger Zelazny that it is Michael Gallinger, but never in the story. Interesting detail about, writing in the unknown. Okay, what is the role of unknown in the story? Okay, if this is from Roger Zelazny, if the writer sees more of the story than he actually tells, it adds strength to the story. It makes the characters more real, right? We see people in real life and we don't know things about them. Okay, why should writing be any different? We should be writing from a stance that we know certain things about this person, but there are so much more about them that we don't know. Okay, role of literature as a whole. This is also from Roger Zelazny, different book, but I think it's very very much talking about the unknown. Okay, to paraphrase Oedipus, Hamlet, Lear, and all those guys, I wish I had known this some time ago. Okay, and this was Corwin of Amber in the book Sign of the Unicorn. Okay, so literature kind of revolves around things that people don't know, right? Hamlet doesn't know that Claudius is is hiding behind the curtain, right? And he thinks it's his uncle, right? And he stabs him. Okay, uh, uh, Oedipus didn't know, who he was, trying to have a baby with, right? And so, uh, all of these stories revolve on the character not knowing something. Okay, so we can see this is something that literature very much relies on. If all the things were known, we probably couldn't have literature. Okay, what does this story say about duty? Okay, and this is Gallinger speaking to Maguire. Then she does not love me, never did. Maguire, I'm sorry, Gallinger. It was one part of her duty she never managed. Duty, I replied flatly. Duty, 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 tra-la. So this idea that duty, people do things because it's their duty, but that can really hurt other people. Okay. And Gallinger doesn't care about Brax's duty, right? And so, by the way, one side note here: do we believe McGuire here? Has McGuire ever shown us anything to make us believe that she is trustworthy? Okay, these are the sort of questions Gallinger should be asking Braxa, right? Do you love me? Okay, because McGuire has every reason to say, Gallinger, Braxa doesn't love you. You better get out of here. Okay? Why? Why does McGuire need to get rid of Gallinger? Well, he's just overthrown their religion. People could start looking to him as a leader, right? Especially if he's tied now irrevocably to the Martian race by having this first hybrid child, right? People could start looking to him as the new leader. And McGuire's like, no, she doesn't love you. Get out of here, Gallinger. So I think Gallinger is making a big mistake by trusting McGuire here. He should talk to Braxa because maybe she has not told her opinion to McGuire, right? Okay, we talked about miracles and it being an optimistic or pessimistic story. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this reading. This is one of my favorite stories of all time. Great writing. And again, if you have any questions, please leave them in the questions discussion forum. And we'll see you next when we talk about that Leviathan whom thou hast made.